If you're looking for the second part of the episode related to Dynatrace Perform, then this episode is for you. Welcome back to the Is It Observable YouTube channel. Today's episode is going to be a bit special because it's the part 2 of the Dynatrace Perform conference. If you pay attention to the release a couple of weeks ago, the part 1, where I shared a lot of updates about the live debugger, the secure posture management, and way more. So check out if you want to hear those news. Today's episode is going to be really more focused on Kubernetes because I interviewed the various product manager in charge of the Kubernetes module in Dynatrace. So we'll hear about the various features that will come this year. And also I had the chance to meet the customer Akamas that has a product that help you to tune your Kubernetes environment on the request and limits and also your HPA rules in your Kubernetes cluster. I also had the chance to meet FreedomPay, where here they're sharing more the story about the usage of OpenPipeline. So it's a very interesting story, very exciting way of using OpenPipeline. And last, we have a partner, Phenisys, that had won a contest about building a custom app. And the app itself is really impressive. So I really encourage you to listen to this interview because at the end, it will give you some insights, especially if you are a Microsoft Teams user. So if you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. So follow me in Las Vegas. So what is the hot session?
What it's about, you mean?
Yeah, what is the topic?
Our dashboarding camp, so you can guess. Maybe...
Power dashboarding?
Dashboarding, yeah!
Never heard about Nirtl. He is one of our product manager working on the Dynatrace operator. So maybe you can introduce yourself. I think you did a lot of things at Dynatrace. So what is your journey at Dynatrace?
Yeah, short history lesson. So I joined in Dynatrace 1 in post-sales, supporting many of our great customers in the day-to-day routines with Dynatrace, and later I then moved to product. All the rollout aspects that come with that, meaning the rollout of the configuration for one agent and ActiveKit.
So there are a lot of things within the scope that you're managing, so the operator itself. So do you have any specific news to share about the operator? I mean, I know that there's a couple of new things, like what are the news about
Great introduction, so thanks. What do we do? First, we will make maybe the CSI driver, if that is known by you, optional. Previously, it was always mandatory for Cloud Native Full Stack, which is the default way to monitor Kubernetes clusters for APM, but also for Kubernetes monitoring.
Okay.
We will change that, so I guess that's good news for security people because the CSI driver, if you don't know, it's a privileged workload and it requires a lot of privileges on Kubernetes.
So if you remove, because the CSI driver had an advantage, it was a way of speeding up because it was a storage, you had the agent or the code module that are required to be able to inject it into our workload and instrument the applications. So if you remove it, what would happen?
Yeah, good point. So the main benefit of CSI driver is you get storage optimizations and the customer value is really convenience. You don't need to care what agent is actually being injected into your application container because for monitoring the application you would need to have a specific technology available. But because of the concepts used in CSI driver, we can use overlay FS and optimize storage so we don't take redundant storage from the node. Okay. And by removing the CSI driver, by making it optional, of course we lose that advantage, but we win something else. We win pool performance, and we, as said, we minimize really the security footprint in terms of privileges required for operating the operator.
So it means that you're optimizing the way the code model is injecting. So you're rethinking the way the code model.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
So we will have two ways going on. One with the CSI driver with great convenience and storage optimizations, and the other one being the CSI-less approach, where we have great pool performance and a better security posture.
There's another thing that honestly excited me a lot is the fact that the operator in the past or in the previous releases we're mainly focused on reporting the health of various Kubernetes objects, such as the pods, the deployments, the namespace, the cluster. And now we're extending to more objects, config maps, secrets, STRDs, and everything. So it means that at the end, because this component is on the ActiveGate, so it means that you're going to discover more things within the cluster.
Exactly, yeah, that's great stuff to come for Kubernetes ops people. So what we will cover in the future in the platform is not only the standard components like you mentioned already with deployments, namespaces and stuff. No, we will expand towards CRDs, towards any other object that you can imagine that lives in the Kubernetes API, and we will make that available in Dynatrace. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And the other thing that was brought my interest is that we talked about the ActiveGate that are used by the operator, but there's a lot of ActiveGates in Dynatrace. There's the one that are not necessarily in the Kubernetes environments. So first of all, what are the differences? Is the Kubernetes ActiveGate different from the other ActiveGate? Could you explain what are the things?
Sure, maybe also a quick history lesson or actually overview on what ActiveGates we have, because it's more an umbrella term in Dynatrace, and we have 3 different kinds of ActiveGates. One I always refer to general purpose ActiveGate, which is the ActiveGate, for example, used for one agent traffic routing, which is maybe the most basic feature of it. But then we have, for example, AWS monitoring, Azure monitoring, the cloud monitoring features. Yet we have Kubernetes monitoring, API ingests available via the ActiveGate. So that's the general purpose ActiveGate. Next to it, we have the synthetic ActiveGate, which is really there for doing the synthetic monitoring and the real user monitoring. And last, we have a C remote ActiveGate for mainframe monitoring.
Okay, interesting.
And the one sorry to add this, maybe the one we run in Kubernetes with the Dynatrace operator is the general purpose one.
I'm a product manager for cloud and Kubernetes, and specifically focusing on the Clouds app and parts of the Kubernetes app, and some recent additions we are working on basically the next iteration on our great Kubernetes experience we do have on our platform.
I had a chance to talk with Martin, so he was more in charge on the actual operator that sits in the cluster, that collects the data, and also there's the ActiveGate topics. So in your case, you are taking the data back and you're doing something else, or you're on the UI. So explain this.
Exactly. So it's on the UI side, basically on our apps, right, that we do have on our platform, and it's how about basically we use all the data from our data lakehouse, which are stored right in Grail, and basically all the use cases we put on top for our customers. For example, how we would give them an opinionated way to do health assessments for cloud and Kubernetes, or optimize resources, or then security and so on, which we have all baked into our domain-specific apps like the Kubernetes app.
I saw a few things about the YAML, so that comes with it. So it means that you are going to also not only provide details about the actual objects, but also the actual definition that has been stored in the cluster, or the updates that has been applied. And same thing for the pods and other objects, I guess. How frequent is this structure being collected? I guess that's the role of the ActiveGate, but is like a mechanism that scans every, I don't know, whatever, minutes or seconds to update and detect. Do you detect thieves, by the way? So a lot of questions about this.
Yeah, it's a great question, but let me start from the beginning, right? Yeah. So with the Dynatrace, new Dynatrace platform, right, everything on Grail, the next thing we're going to do is really bring on top of the telemetry signals, all the metadata configuration on Grail too, and bring the value of Grail to our customers, right? And the big benefit is, as Grail is really gives us so much performance benefits, and it scales so well that we can even store, right, the definitions of your objects, right? You mentioned the YAML, so we will really be able to store that on Grail too, make it accessible throughout the apps, but for really advanced use cases, you can even query it, right, by using DQL in dashboards, notebooks, whatsoever, bring everything again together in context. So, and what we are doing specifically to a question about, the ActiveGate is we're essentially watching what changes, right, and are aware on top of that. So you always have basically the latest information available, and this is basically the way we are going to provide really a lot of additional insights.
I guess to be able to store those objects and new objects in the YAML file, you basically renew the storage model or the, I don't know how you name it, but how you're storing the data actually in Grail?
Yes, so exactly. So basically all these configurations, the metadata and the relationships between these objects, right? Basically we call it topology, right? The vertical stack in Kubernetes, right? From cluster down to containers, but even your config maps, custom resources, your ingress or whatsoever, right? We really store that in Grail too with all these relationships. At the end, it's some sort of graph, right? And you can combine it, of course, or we combine it in context with metrics, traces, logs, and really then have Davis on top of all that, right? So at the end, we bring much more information to Davis, feed our AI, and this should give, of course, a lot of additional insights on all the potential, problems that could pop up in a Kubernetes environment.
So is there like a, I guess because it's a change in the storage model, is there like a migration stuff? So then the schema that were used in the past is migrating slowly to the new schema, or how is the journey? Is the customer one has nothing to do? It's going to be automatic, or how does it work?
That's a great question. So yes, so basically we are bringing the new information to Grail, right? It will be some sort of transition period where it will live side by side, but ultimately at some point we will bring all the goodness to Grail, right? And then there's no need to still access basically the previous storage information, which, as we do have much more value, much more information in Grail, but it should be actually quite seamless, right, in this transition.
And then I had another question, because you mentioned Kubernetes objects, and at the end when you have a cluster, you can end up with, I don't know, many different CRDs and many. Are you by default collecting everything, or the user would have like in the settings of Dynatrace says, oh, I'm interested in those objects and the rest I don't need it because I don't want to overwhelm of data objects that I don't even care of. How does it work? Or is there settings for this?
So that's a great question. So essentially what we are going to do is we will add for all these well-known objects like right around the storage, config side of the house, networking, we will add them over time, right? There's no need for a customer, right, really to modify settings there. And for custom resources, we're currently right in the planning phase on that side, and we will potentially leverage, well-known concepts that we already have in place, like extensions, right, to bring the information alongside, because obviously you need to know on a custom resource, the structure,
what the field you're interested in,
which API, right, do you need or is required for a particular CRD, which API version, right, which can of course change over time, and there's no, shotgun approach to all approaches.
Meaning that it's you place the first bricks, and then that will allow in the future to have more and more extensions in the Dynatrace hub, covering more and more cloud-native solutions that are out there in Dynatrace.
Yeah, and of course we want to provide, of course, additional, opinionated insights which could use out of the box, and they will all be basically packaged right in an extension. Right? Okay. If you think about, I don't know, Redis or so, there's, a particular way how you would basically analyze what's going on in Redis, right? Which metrics are relevant? How would you assess health there? Okay. Probably even you want to have a dashboard, right? A ready-made dashboard around that. So that's already a bit, on the longer term side out there.
I know that you're not only dedicated to Kubernetes, you're also working on the cloud providers integrations that are already available. So are there any updates about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I'm working on the cloud tab too, right? And obviously similar to Kubernetes, we do have cloud integration, for example, AWS, Azure, GCP, and we are planning some exciting enhancements on that side too, right? To make it much easier to set up those integrations and basically bring in a lot more additional signals. So basically all metrics, logs, right? Traces, events, and again, the configurations, right? The metadata.
So similar,
yes.
So then the Lambda will have a specific storage or an object storage or whatever. Or something.
Yeah. Basically, whole definition, right? All the configurations that you would have for a Lambda or C2 instance or or an Azure function.
And then there's the last topic that I wanted to discuss. It's not a fresh news, but I think it deserves to be shared with our communities. That there's been an initiative from Dynatrace on the Istio side. So can you tell us about what was the initiative and what did we do from the upstream project in Istio?
Yeah, I mean, as you know very well, and the folks on the show know, we are heavily contributing into open telemetry, right? So what we did on the Istio side is we contributed a lot we started on the Envoy side, right, on how to make basically, how to export traces, right, from Envoy, right, into different platforms, specifically, the HTTP exporter, and how you could do sampling and resource detectors, right? So there's really a lot we added there, starting from Envoy at the core, and then, of course, added
and then
configuration.
Forwarded it back to Istio.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So which means that now, from an Istio perspective, I can basically enable just directly the no OTL HTTP endpoint without having the need to go to gRPC.
Exactly. So need to have an OTel collector in between, just for example, to do the conversion from gRPC to HTTP.
Hello everyone, I'm Jonas from Phenisys for 7 years now. I'm on technical part. I help my customer to improve their observability and to improve their visibility on all the from IT for it.
Hello, I'm Aurélien Gonzalez. I work for Phenisys for 2 years now, and as Jonas, I work with our customer to help them to use their observability platform and create their roadmap over the future years.
So what is Phenisys providing to the market? Do you provide specific services? So could you explain what's the purpose? What is the actual core business of Phenisys?
Yeah, well, we are a French company that are a pure player observability. We help our customer to use Dynatrace, to implement it. We give them advice, things like that. We help them to have a roadmap for the next 3-5 years. And we help them to maintain their platform, things like that.
And I see that you have on the table a price.
Yeah.
So what is that price about? Maybe you can show on the camera. What is that price all about?
We just won this prize with a competition organized by Dynatrace. That is an app competitor, and we just win it in the Perform.
So that it was a contest where people has to build an app. So who was it? All the partners, all the community members, who had access to that?
Everybody has access to this competition, and since we like Dynatrace so much, we were like, okay, we need to do something about this. We have a lot of case, a lot of clients, and we have something to help to improve everything, and we have something to do about that.
So I guess the selection of the app was based on specific criteria. So what is the criteria to be? I mean, you won obviously, so probably the criteria, you know the criteria. So what was the main idea behind this contest?
There is some criteria, of course. The added value to the customer is the first one, I think.
Yeah.
And the other one is how integration is done in Dynatrace. The app needs to be really an improvement of the existing Dynatrace platform. So we need to use the existing view, no custom visualization. And
so you mean on the SDK, the custom, the core UI component that Dynatrace provides in the SDK?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And so you won, so it means that you fulfill all those requirements. So what was your app about?
Our app name is Microsoft Teams Observability, and as you can think about it, well, this is mostly related to Microsoft Teams to investigate what is going on the platform of the Teams component, and get information like the number of calls, the quality of the calls, and get a drill down until the users get the information like, are they using their phone, their mobile phone? Are they using a laptop? Are they connected in Wi-Fi or in network cable?
Yeah.
Things like that. Are they connected to a Microsoft component that is in Australia, for example, but the user are in France, so if you have high latency, things like that.
So how does the app is providing? Is like you have a central screen that provides the overview of all the calls of the world.
Yeah.
And then if you click on one of those calls, you enter in the call and you see the details of the call itself.
Exactly. Yeah, you have the main overview view to see the global statistics for the whole company.
Yeah.
And then you can go further to list all the call for different filter for a person, for health, quality health, and you can drill down like that and select the call you want to see. And in the next screen, you can go in the whole detail of the call. You have the map. You have the different context information, durations.
So by the map, you mean where are the various participants of the call located?
Exactly.
Yeah. This whole map, in fact, will show you some points that can go bigger with different variation of colors, depending on the number of users, the number of the quality of the calls.
Okay.
When I say calls, it can be video meetings. It can be screen sharing, things like that. The calls that you can get directly with your phone, since Microsoft Teams is capable of doing that. We don't take the information about the chat. This is not a part that is, for the moment, is interesting us. We are really focusing
on the quality experience of the
exactly.
the meeting or the call that you may have.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So building that app, I guess there was an actual journey. So I guess there you have first probably a way of collecting that data, and then you're sending it to Dynatrace.
Exactly,
you relying on existing components of Dynatrace or Geigl, or I don't know how you did it. And then you have the actual UI based on the data store. So could you explain a bit how this is working?
That's quite simple. We were using an agent that collects all the data from Microsoft API.
Yeah.
And then we are filtering this information because, for example, for one single call, you can get like 10,000 lines of JSON. So we need to filter a bit the information and to extract only the information we think it's very valuable for the client, for the customer, and we do that, and then we calculate and enrich the data we collect with, for example, the health of the call, because basically Microsoft don't
provide that type of details.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Microsoft provides an ABAC matrix with the criteria of is that a good or a bad call.
Okay, so you based on numbers, you're putting the quality level on that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then how do you push it to Dynatrace? Is it sending metrics? Are you sending events? Are you sending what is the format?
We are using the logs, so
okay.
We are pushing all the data through logs to Dynatrace, and then we are using the OpenPipeline module to filter, to extract metrics, and to store logs in buckets.
Okay, and then at the end, the app, the UI itself is basically take advantage of the different UI component available on the SDK, and just querying the data that has been stored through, through that. Okay, cool, interesting, awesome. First of all, congratulations for your price. And if people wants to leverage and take advantage of this app, where can they find it?
They can find it directly on the Dynatrace Hub.
Okay.
They just need to search for Microsoft Teams, and they will find the application. They can subscribe to a trial of 30 days, and then they can come back to us and see if they want to go further or not. And they can also go directly to the AWS marketplace and find the application also there.
Okay.
And same thing, they can do, then you can subscribe, then you can ask for a trial of 30 days, and we will happily discuss with you. I'm an observability engineer at FreedomPay.
You've been using OpenPipeline in a very early stage. So I'm very interested on basically what you are doing with OpenPipeline. What is the use case? What were you able to resolve with this?
Well, it first starts, I guess, with the logs. So our main use case was we started sending more and more logs into Dynatrace. And as you can imagine, it starts to get messy if you don't try to organize it at all. So we learned that we could create custom buckets, store the logs in custom buckets and stuff like that. And we did that in the classic pipeline first. Then OpenPipeline comes along. And I guess I should say the main reason we did that was because we had a different
log source, I guess.
Log source before.
Yeah.
And it had indexes, and everyone was used to, okay, these logs are in this index, these logs are in this index. So we set up the buckets to kind of be a similar, just look in this bucket, that's all the logs you need. So we did that with the classic pipeline first, then came OpenPipeline, and as you can imagine with the classic pipeline, we got quite a long list of these rules to do all the bucket assignment, which was originally the only thing we were doing. OpenPipeline came along, I started using the dynamic routing and the bucket assignments inside the pipeline to start sending those logs in there different places, and it made it a lot simpler for me.
To manage the log itself?
Right, and just the rule set, the configuration was a lot simpler because I no longer had to worry about the top-down matchers in the classic pipeline and trying to filter out exactly and make sure I didn't conflict with another rule that was above it.
Okay.
Now I have just a simple dynamic route, send it to this pipeline, and then once it's there, I can forget all about that and do whatever I want.
Yeah, just to remind, so the bucket is, for example, you can decide that this log will be stored in a specific log storage.
Yep.
So here in your case, you have different log storage prepared.
Yep, different retention periods, stuff like that.
And then the other thing is you use OpenPipeline because at the end you have different log source, probably different log structure, and then you may probably use OpenPipeline to have different type of parser that you apply for those sources.
Yep, so once we got into OpenPipeline, we started playing around with all the other features, like the metric extraction, the events extraction, the security context, which was mentioned in one of the breakout sessions with our B2B customer. And doing that in OpenPipeline, like I said, just makes it so much more simple. Plus, you have the added benefit of being able to use DQL.
Yeah.
The classic pipeline, when you did a processing rule, you had to use this kind of different parsing syntax language. And it seemed different compared to everything else in Dynatrace, but now you can just use native DQL, the regular parse command that you're used to. You can build it in a notebook first, copy and paste it into the OpenPipeline, and away you go.
And then do you generate metrics out of the logs directly with the OpenPipeline pipeline, or
yes,
or you still rely on logs?
So we're generating metrics and events out of the logs with OpenPipeline, and a lot of those are Windows event logs or maybe IIS logs, and we're just tracking particular details in those logs that we want to chart or stuff like that, like the HTTP code, stuff like that. Use a metric to track that, and we do it in OpenPipeline. The events extraction we also use a lot of times for Windows events, like our security guys are really concerned with a new user account is created or an unexpected shutdown or something like that, so we use the events to send alerts to the security guys.
So there are different type of events in Dynatrace. So what type of events are you producing out of those logs?
Usually just custom info for the most part, because a lot of those custom events that we're creating are going to trigger a workflow. So we don't want them necessarily to create a problem right away. Some of the use cases are just custom alerts, so they just generate a problem, and that's all we need to know. We can go from there. But a lot of these new ones are custom info type, and we use that to trigger a workflow and then do some sort of automation or
With
auto
that source,
remediation or something like
from
that.
that source, yeah.
With the event as the trigger. Yep.
And because there is another section called biz events, so do you also take advantage of the building biz events then to basically do different processing or different analytics out of this?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought this up. So we recently started our biz event journey. Once we realized that we weren't going to be subject to ALR and stuff like that, we could get 100% capture and extract the same data we were doing with like request attributes.
Yeah.
So we started using biz events very heavily. We have a lot of throughput in our environment. So lots and lots of biz events were coming through. Now, you get lots of data, you have to make sense of the data. So using biz events in OpenPipeline has been something kind of new that we've started to use.
Yeah.
But same thing, extracting metrics, parsing fields, some cases extracting events, and then also doing bucket assignment and security context because we're doing a little bit of B2B data sharing with the biz events with one of our customers.
Yeah.
So we can apply security context right in
So
OpenPipeline.
then they will be the only ones seeing it and so on.
Exactly.
Okay, I see. And so at the end, with this specific OpenPipeline feature, did you resolve something that was very, manual task or very expensive to manage in day-to-day basis? And now with this, you have more automation or more freedom to build automation?
Lots of freedom. That's the main thing for me, and the freedom and the organization has been really helpful as a Dynatrace administrator.
Yeah.
That classic way of viewing all those rules together was getting a little bit messy as you add more and more rules. So the OpenPipeline keeps it very simple, very straightforward. We've been able to do lots more complex parsing rules, like we have some F5 syslog coming in and security logs from the F5, and they spit out this gigantic payload in the logs and has all kinds of different information, what attack came in, blah, 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 stuff like that. And we've been able to easily parse that with DQL. And when the logs come through and finally hit the storage bucket, they're all nice and pretty, and we have fields, and we're extracting metrics. So it solved a few problems with that, for sure.
Because at the end, it's just you sending observability telemetry data to Dynatrace, and this is a way of structuring it or making it more easier to utilize it later on once you want to do a workflow or dashboard or whatever you want. So do you have any recommendation? If someone says, okay, it sounds interesting, but it sounds very complicated as well. So what were your suggestions? What would be the best way of getting started and utilizing OpenPipeline properly?
Yeah, I think the best way is just to start with a simple use case, right? You start with your simple use case. Maybe it's logs, maybe it's biz events, maybe it's other events, security events, or maybe even spans now I see are in preview. Simple use case, I think. Build it out, and then you'll get an idea, a feel for how you want to build everything else out. Like I know I went back after I did the logs the first time and kind of changed the way I did my dynamic routing, like thinking more high level, okay, what type of log is this? What's the different data structure? Maybe that's how I need to separate my pipelines. And you can have more than one dynamic route going to the same pipeline or vice versa.
Would you recommend to, for example, at the source, add extra fields or extra keys in the logs or whatever telemetry data to then be able to simplify how you're going to configure the routing rule? Because the idea is that I have some keys and say, oh, if I have let's say you said syslog, oh, if it's coming from syslog security or F5, then trigger that pipeline. Because at the end, Dynatrace needs to know what type of pipeline he has to trigger. Would you recommend to, when you do this, that at the source, starting to add more context so then simplify that routing?
Yeah, and we're actually starting to do some of this. We're doing a logging renovation for our applications, and we run .NET, so we're going to use Serolog to send to Dynatrace as our log source. And part of that is adding that context as the log is coming out of Serolog. So we add a couple of key values that allow me to route those logs to a specific pipeline and do something very specific with them. And it makes life way easier. I know I've run into a couple situations where there wasn't enough data in that original log message for me to properly route it the way that I wanted to. And I had to go back to developers and say, can you just add this one field?
So my focus in Kubernetes is really everything that you see in our product, right? So I care about how does the app work for Kubernetes? How does Kubernetes work if you're in the notebooks, right? How does Kubernetes work with dashboards? How does Kubernetes work with workflows? So I really care about, I'm a Kubernetes user, what do I get out of Dynatrace, right, in the product?
So we are at Dynatrace Perform, and there's a lot of things going on, and my interest, to be honest, is obviously Kubernetes and cloud native related topics. So in 2025, I guess that a lot of things has been announced, and a lot of things will be added to Dynatrace. And what about in your end? What does that mean for 2025? What would that mean for our users?
Gotcha. So that's a great question, and I'm very excited what we're going to ship this year. And I think we already had an awesome start of the year. So we just recently, got more time awareness for the Kubernetes app, so you can now go back in time in the Kubernetes app. So that's amazing. A lot of people ask for that. We got it now. It's out there. We're also just introducing segments. I think it just went out yesterday, so that's awesome. So you can now use Kubernetes segments in the Kubernetes app. Also something a lot of people need, right, to scope down their environment, just want to look at my production stuff, just want to look at my pre-production. So that's an amazing feature that's out there. And going forward, we're now going to really focus on end-to-end troubleshooting flows. Like I start in Dynatrace, I get a problem, right? Opening up Dynatrace, I want to go from the problem in the Kubernetes app, be in the right context, have the right time frame, have all my data related to it. So we're really going to focus on making smooth flows throughout the product so that troubleshooting becomes really easy. And there are several parts to it, right? Time frame selection is one of it.
Yeah,
Segments.
I was going to say that, because at the end, if you wanted to be clicking on a problem that was happening in the past, to be able to open it, you have to add that time selector. Yeah.
Totally. So that's really important here. And also we're going to leverage AI. Of course, like we just introduced Copilot for the Kubernetes app. Super exciting.
So what does that mean? Because Copilot could mean, could you ask settings about your cluster, or is it more about, oh, I see that resource consumption? So give us a use case.
Yeah, awesome. So the use case is, I personally now with Kubernetes since 4 years, I told you, and before that I was working with Docker Swarm for some years. So I'm in this area for very long. And there's so many native signals of Kubernetes. I don't remember all of them. Like there's warning events, right? There's conditions, and there's so many of them. And it's hard to remember what they mean. Like what did they tell you? Like killing is probably an easier one. There's unhealthy probes that's throwing events. And what we allow you now is that you can go in the app, you see the signal, you click on it and you say, Copilot, please explain this to me. And what Copilot will do is like, he will tell you what it is. It will tell you what are typical root causes for this warning signal. And it will also tell you for each of them how you would remediate it. So it's a Kickstarter, right? Like you're just getting started with Kubernetes. You don't know what that's all about.
So it means that you don't need to have a Google tab open next to it.
Exactly. Like it's a, let me Google that for you kind of thing. But it's built in the product and it's straight away like,
okay.
So that's awesome. And I think, the AI tools are getting traction in the market, but I think a lot of people are still not using it. And by building it in the product, we make it really easy for our customers to leverage the full power of it. So
cool.
Amazing.
And so we had a chance to prepare a hot day sessions on Kubernetes. And I think there are also things that, I'm not sure you're in charge of this, but I think it's quite interesting for the users that you can also interact with Kubernetes through workflows. So could you tell us a bit more?
Sure. I think it perfectly fits in the story, right? We just talked about problem troubleshooting, and very often there's the same problem occurring again and again, and you already know like how to fix it. And the typical example that I would give is bots being stuck in terminated. Like these are things you don't change in your config. That's just Kubernetes is not working as it's supposed to be.
Yep.
And what you get now with Dynatrace is you can build a workflow that will get rid of those things. Like the workflow, there's going to be new actions for Kubernetes that allow you to interact with the cluster API directly. You can list resources, you can delete bots, you can change stuff in there, apply new configurations. So you can build automatic remediations for whatever needs you have in Dynatrace.
So I'm Stefano Doni, CTO and co-founder of Akamas. So Akamas is a company that we built after doing performance tuning and capacity planning for the last 20 years or so. So the idea is that tuning performance and reliability of application has become really complex due to the complexity of the IT. So it's always been a manual process, an error-prone process. So with Akamas, basically, we help SREs, performance engineers, and DevOps, and application teams as well, to basically automate the tuning part of the application. So get applications that are faster, cheaper, and more reliable.
Last year, I think, or 2 years ago, you released something about Kubernetes, because initially you were mainly in the performance environment or tuning environment or QA environment to tune up a service or a component, and then you shifted to the Kubernetes world. So what is Kubernetes optimization or tuning for Akamas? What does it mean?
First of all, we did this kind of focus on Kubernetes because actually Kubernetes is a great platform. So it's a new operating system for basically all new cloud-native developments. But what we really found out is that despite the promise of kind of realizing self-healing and highly efficient applications, when we work with customers, we constantly find a situation that is quite the opposite. So we find huge inefficiency, and also reliability problems for the applications that are running on Kubernetes. Just to give you some numbers, we were looking last week with a colleague. So out of all the clusters that we analyzed, I would say last year for our customer, the average utilization of the CPU is really low as 5%. So hundreds and hundreds of CPU basically that are sitting idle, and that is despite the fact that Kubernetes gives you this promise of super dense, highly efficient packing, etc. But the reality is unfortunately very different.
Yeah, because we intend to put, when you start onboarding in Kubernetes, you intend to put pretty much high values in requests or requests that are not really aligned with our usage. Or sometimes it could be the opposite, where we put very low values and we discover that we need more. Do you have any trends, by the way? Because you've seen that most of your customers are using 5%. Yeah. Did you extract some trends based on this observation?
Yeah, exactly. So what we saw is that this is due mainly to basically two big reasons. On one side, there are technical reasons, but there are also organizational reasons that we are seeing. So on the technical side, as you said, so the complexity arises from the fact that you have many more tunable options than before. Of course, request limits, but also if you think about the application that runs within the container, like the JVM, for example, for Java application, it needs to be properly tuned, and that's add to the existing complexity. And also you have many more microservices than before that are highly dynamic and scale up and down with the traffic, etc. So it's very complex for teams that do not have these deep skills to optimize properly the application. But there was also what we found out, especially lately, working with big customer organizational issues, in that basically it seems like optimization is really the ownership of no team. Because you have, for example, platform engineers, they mostly care about, of course, providing infrastructure to the application teams, of course, all the benefits towards increasing developer velocity, etc. But they don't do, of course, tuning the application because it's not their own job. But if you speak to the application teams, most of the time what we see is that they have different priorities. So their core goal is to kind of ship application new feature faster for the business, right? And when you speak about, for example, reducing cost of the application or improving reliability, improving performance, this typically is a priority that's it's not at the top. So we kind of live in this kind of limbo in a way that, of course, everybody wants to save cost, even from the top of the organization. But when you kind of go down, you talk with the actual team, you start to see that nobody is doing pretty much anything or just scratching the surface, and that creates this huge inefficiency problem.
But you were mentioning the cost, but in today's world, and we go even more further, it consumes energy. Yeah. So it's not very green to produce unoptimized code, and I think this is where it makes sense to optimize.
Yeah, exactly. Sustainability is another very important angle, and that, of course, the good news is that goes is very well tied with cost reduction. So if you have an initiative to reduce costs, most of the time you will also reduce your carbon footprint. That is good.
So how does Akamas comes into the picture in that specific area? So
yeah. So we have a pretty different approach with respect to all the others optimization tool. So one aspect that we like to do is that we optimize the full stack. So if you think about Kubernetes, for example, you have the nodes, you have the cluster autoscaling, you have the pods, you have the pod autoscaling, and you also have the runtime that runs like the JVM within the container.
Yeah.
So typically most teams, and also most products out there, just focus on one piece of the stack. So for example, we talk with teams that say, okay, I've adopted a cluster autoscaling solution like Carpenter, which is great, and I'm all set. I'm super efficient, I don't need to do anything else. That is not true, because if, for example, you don't align your request limits on the pod or the JVM side, you will still face inefficiency. So the approach with Akamas is that let's look at the full stack and let's make sure that every layer in the stack, in the Kubernetes stack, is properly configured towards your goal, which may be, of course, cost reduction, but also the other important thing is that we want to reduce costs while not impacting performance. So the way we do that is Akamas is an optimization platform that integrates with Dynatrace. So we collect data from Dynatrace, and then we build some special purpose AI based on reinforcement learning that basically analyze the data and recommend changes to the software configuration of the stack.
So when you apply those changes, how do you do it? You send an event back to Dynatrace, you generate a pull request, or you just change it live? What's the approach?
Yeah, we have basically two approaches. One is that we can also talk directly with the Kubernetes APIs or even the cloud APIs and do the change ourselves. But most of the time, of course, teams have started to adopt a GitOps approach or infrastructure as code approach. So the preferred way typically is to open up a request so that the SRE team, the DevOps team, of course, are aligned or the new changes, they can approve it, and everybody is happy. And also we send events also to Dynatrace, so that also, for example, Davis AI can look at the event and it can understand, for example, if some changes is happening, what might be the root cause.
And how, because doing continuously optimization every time could be inefficient as well, because then you're asking the rescheduler, the scheduler of Kubernetes to always do a rollout update continuously, so it could be also expensive. So how often are you suggesting those optimizations? Is it daily basis? Is it weekly basis? Is it hourly basis?
It's configurable, but typically what we see customer, we align with the customer processes basically. Typically it's something like daily or, I don't know, a couple of days, because typically when a customer want to change in production, want to see, for example, with a new configuration, want to see the full business cycle and see, okay, I'm actually reducing cost, it's more efficient, and it's still reliable. So they want to have a look at response time, error rates, and make sure that everything works as expected. So it's not something that kind of goes minute by minute and changes the configuration, even because, as we said, there is a human that still needs to approve the changes. In the future, of course, in our vision would be, the idea would be to completely automate the process. And also what is interesting is that as a new trend, Kubernetes is adding more and more capability to kind of tune the platform live on the fly without restarting the container, for example.
Yeah, that's for the VPA, but...
Yeah, like the in-place pod resize, so we will be able to change all those settings without requiring a human intervention.
Yeah, that's true.
So that will be even...
I think you released something or you announced something recently, so what is your updates? What is the new things that Akamas provides now?
Yeah, the new thing is called Akamas Insight. So it's a new capability within Akamas that actually is aimed at basically showing the customer the benefit of optimization before actually starting doing it. So why we launched Insight is because, again, due to the skill gaps, which is another factor that kind of impact this situation, we saw that many teams are not even aware of how inefficient their Kubernetes environments are. Or sometimes even they are not even aware that they have reliability risk. For example, an application is about to go in to be memory killed, or you have nodes with very high memory usage that is about to kill application. So a lot of situation, people that is not basically don't know about those things. So we created Insight to kind of highlight these optimization opportunities automatically. So basically, we connect to with Dynatrace. Again, we collect data from all the clusters, and then basically in a dashboard, we present the impact of those findings in a cost reduction for efficiency, reliability, and compliance.
Sometimes the challenge is to, what are the right HPA rule I should define to have a good auto-scaling policies in place, and efficient also, because having an inefficient HPA role doesn't make sense. So do you also provide that as well in your optimization package?
Yeah, exactly. That is a key part of that, because of course with Kubernetes the beauty is that of course you can auto-scale the workloads, but still the HPA was great for the most part for many teams, but the challenge becomes, as you said, how do I choose the right metric to scale? How do I set the right threshold? And the thing is that, of course, this depends also on the performance requirements that you have. So if you have a big traffic spike in an e-commerce website, you need to be able to cope with that traffic without throwing errors. You need to scale well in advance because, of course, scaling the costs takes time. So Akamas is uniquely positioned to solve the problem because our AI also looks at application performance. So it's not just simply looking at CPU usage and identifying the best thresholds, but we also look at application performance. So what an SRE or a performance engineer might say, okay, let's find the best configuration of the scaling policy so that my response time at the peak will be always below, 100 milliseconds. So Akamas will play with all those rules automatically and we figure out what is the scaling policy that still matches this requirement while being efficient. So creates the less amount of CPU requested overall in a period, which is at the end of the day what you pay on Kubernetes.
That's it for today's episode related to the conference Dynatrace Perform. As you can see, very excited to see that a lot of improvements are going to be made in the Dynatrace operator, and especially covering all the Kubernetes objects, the CRDs, and also the fact that now with these extensions, we have the options to build and customize even more Dynatrace by covering any CRDs that may have been built or deployed in your cluster. So very exciting. I think it's very promising to extend the way we are observing our Kubernetes cluster using the Dynatrace operator. I really like the usage of OpenPipeline, using the logs, converting them, building metrics in events. I think very interesting way of doing it. So being able to convert logs to take advantage of other type of signals makes a lot of sense. Then you're more efficient when you need to query the data in your observability backend, in this case, Dynatrace. If you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. So see you soon for another episode. Bye.